This is News Talk 980 CKNW.
Well, you know what? We've been talking about Trump a lot, so I think you'd be forgiven for thinking it's all Trump all the time. Given his stream of executive policy orders, it's hard to keep up with him over the last 2 weeks.
But I wonder what the impact of those things has been like on the markets. And is the coverage overshadowing other notable stories that we need to know about? Well, let's bring in Michael Campbell. He's the host of Canada's #1 rated financial show, Money Talks. He's going to discuss these things with us. Mike, what's your take? Is it all Trump 24/7, or maybe you see it differently?
Well, it sure seems like it's been since since the primaries. I mean, he's an interesting story. First of all, he already had a celebrity status. He's a polarizing figure. I think he appealed to an awful lot of people who are fed up with the system. I was looking at that poll from Pew Research that took place in October, and it found that only 19% of Americans trust government most of the time. 74% thought that elected officials put their own interests ahead of the public's. And I thought this was interesting. 55% thought ordinary Americans would do better solving problems. Well, Donald Trump got to carry that mantle. He's obviously very flamboyant. He's politically incorrect. And so the media actually liked him at the beginning. I mean, it created way more interest in the primaries and leading up into the main election campaign than I think they'd seen previously. I mean, the bottom line is he offered a choice to people who had not been paying attention to politics. But here's the other big one. I mean, he's the president of the U.S., the biggest economy in the world, the reserve currency in the world. So when he talks stuff like free trade, currencies, tax competitiveness, I think pretty much everybody's got to listen. So I think that helps explain why there's been so much coverage of him in the last couple of weeks.
Well, there's been so much to talk about. Honestly, it's hard to keep up with this administration. There's been people talking about free trade and immigration and taxation. What's really jumped out for you?
Well, as you say, we've had a lot of talk about it, but a few things maybe I'll grab that aren't getting quite the same level of focus. And that's, everybody's guessing what's on the table if we're actually renegotiating NAFTA. And I thought it might be interesting. It may well include our supply management system. It protects our dairy and poultry farmers from U.S. lower price competition. And it's estimated, by the way, to cost the average Canadian family about $300 per year. So, it's those kind of issues that we've been talking, softwood lumber, because it was already on the table before Mr. Trump became president. Now we've got to discuss or maybe guess at what else is going to be there. Well, some people are starting to talk about that supply management system. Then you got the immigration file. Well, I've been saying that has been on the table a long time. Just this morning, I watched a speech by Bill Clinton in 1997 talking about automatically jailing any deported immigrant who re-entered the U.S. I mean, the Obama administration deported more than the sum of all other 20th century presidents combined. ABC News put the number between 2009 and 2015, so it's not including 2016, at 2.5 million people deported through immigration orders. I mean, it was President Obama who said the U.S. was no longer going to take Cuban refugees. It's been a huge issue in Europe, obviously. I mean, it played a major role in the Brexit vote. You got the rise of anti-EU parties that I think has really been propelled by the anti-refugee sentiments, and like the National Front in France, the Freedom Party in Hungary. But here's the thing. There's 21 million refugees estimated to be in the world. So when the current sort of opposition and the indignation and at times political grandstanding slows down a little bit, I think we need a serious discussion around refugees and immigration. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense to start talking about a blanket open border statement. We got to know what are the parameters, and I have to have, it's really interesting in talking. This has been a hot subject, as you guys certainly know. But I haven't found anyone, actually, who knows what Canada's policies already are in terms of, how do we vet? How long does it take to get the papers to get in? What services are we providing? And do we do any follow-up? I'm talking in terms of language training, employment help, in order to ease integration into the country. So, as I say, 21 million refugees in the world. We got to get a little more in-depth about what we can do, how we can help, learn lessons from other countries, et cetera.
You guys are going to hate me for this. I know we started talking about Trump, but I'm going to go back to Trump here for a second. Now, Trump has been president for 12 days today, Mike, and he's made a lot of announcements, a lot of big statements too. Do you think there's anything in there that we've overlooked?
Yeah, absolutely, Drex. And I think it is big because, let's face it, one of the big features of the last 5 years in the world of finance has been a strong U.S. dollar. We know that as Canadians. We've seen our loonie fall. It's, the U.S. dollar prices all the commodities, and we certainly know the impact of a lower oil price, et cetera. Well, my goodness, he has been talking big time in the last week about that the euro is really undervalued. He's talked about the peso, and he's actually right on that one. But come on, he's going to be talking about the loonie, and this plays a big part in discussing trade, because that's one of the challenges for the U.S. I mean, their goods become more expensive, so obviously they're selling less. But it's, come on, in the first week of January, the U.S. was at a 14-year high against a basket of currencies. Now, I've been thinking that was probably it for a while, that we're going to get a weakening of the U.S. dollar for a few months here. I'll take advantage of that, I think. I suspect I will, unless there's some other news comes out, of buying more U.S. dollars as the Canadian goes up. I mean, we're off a little bit today, but come on, we've gone up from 72, 73. We've been into the 77-cent range or touching that level. So I'm not surprised by that, but I don't think it's sustainable. But, I mean, I look all around, speaking of the trade, since NAFTA was put in place, I think the peso has dropped about 80% against the U.S. dollar. Just in the last 2 years, it's down 50%, 2.5 years, about 50%. Well, no wonder the U.S. is having a little more difficult selling its goods into there. And I think some of the trade issue has to come back to the currencies and have some sort of adjustment around that. But again, that's when saner heads will prevail. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, when I start hearing them talking more about, that the U.S. dollar is too strong, other currencies too weak, I really paid attention.
Well, everyone has an opinion about Donald Trump. You love him, you hate him, but the markets seem to be reacting positively.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've had this monstrous jump since November 9th. When you went November 9th into December 31st, it was the biggest post-election rally since 1952 with Dwight Eisenhower. But here's the thing. A lot of people have made money because of that move. That's why you started to see some profit taking. So they sort of drifted in January a little bit. Then we bounced last week over 20,000. But I still think it's vulnerable to some profit taking. I mean, that's the name of the game for a lot of people, especially on the trading side. Hey, we've made some money. I'm getting out. And the other thing is that we've heard a little bit more about his agenda. So we know that, corporate tax rates are going to drop. We know that, he's going to reduce regulations dramatically. All of those would be seen as positive for the stocks. But we already know that. So we're going to have to see what other news may drive this. And I sort of hesitate here because it's more complicated than this. I mean, obviously, you could get a geopolitical surprise in Europe. You could get China. You look at Iran testing that missile last week. NATO, Russia, Europe, all of those things. But we know this from the last several years. When problems happen in the world, money flows into the U.S. So it can change everything. And that's why I think longer term the U.S. is still the place to be.
All right, Michael Campbell. In fact, catch Michael Campbell's Money Talks this weekend, a special edition too, coming to you live from Michael's World Outlook Conference. Mike, good luck for the conference, and we'll hear you on the radio on Saturday.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.
Vancouver's news, Vancouver's talk. This is News Talk 980, CKNW.